course design and in your teaching, and be able to select ideas that you might want to incorporate. For those of you who've been teaching for 100 years online, some of these will probably be familiar to you. I'm hoping some of them are new. For those of you who are kind of newbies at teaching online and remotely, I hope you'll be able to take some of these to heart. And the resources for this session partly are coming from Quality Matters. I'm the Quality Matters coordinator here at NNU, and I also served in that position at Boise State for 4 years. And I've been an instructional designer and or technologist for 17 years in higher ed, which makes me sound old. And Improving Your Blended Teaching was a course that we put together here in our office last summer. In response to COVID, and we kind of packaged up a lot of our expertise and knowledge into that course. We also happen to be a nominee for Learning Technologies team, in case you want to take a look at that. So yes, little tips for course design. Build modules for content and activities. In our creation of the Improving Your Blended Teaching course, we actually interviewed quite a few students and poured through 2,000 course evaluations from the spring. And one of the things that students really wanted was a consistent structure to be able to know, what am I being expected to do? How do I find it? And modules is the best way to do that. Your learning management system might call it something else. We happen to be a Canvas school, but you can put all of your pages, discussions, quizzes, everything you might need for the week or for a unit right in the modules area. And when you do that, also take advantage, if you can, of adjusting your navigation system so that students don't see a clutter of assignments, pages, files. I always liken keeping the files open on your navigation as if you had a file cabinet right in your classroom. You told students, go to the file cabinet and get your handout for this week. You wouldn't do that, so go ahead and hide those menu items. Number 2, consider numbering the module content. This saves your bacon and the bacon of the students, because if a student says, I have a question about the Bennett assignment, okay, in which week was that, or whatever. If you use numbering, then the student can say, oh, it's the 6.03 check for understanding that I had the question on. That way you can get to it very easily. And it also is very good for helping you to keep your gradebook structured. So if you don't like numbering, a lot of people in humanities don't, just do week 1, week 2, week 3. Use the learning management system calendar. Over and over in our research for the blended teaching course, students were telling us, I need to know what's due and when. And their use of the learning management system, especially the Canvas dashboard, was very different from the way we instructors tend to look at it. So try to put in the due dates for things. In Canvas, you can also create a page to do, and that puts items directly on the calendar, or in this case, the dashboard for the students. We are moving pretty fast today, by the way, and we'll have some time at the end for some questions. So if I go way too fast, I do have a Google Doc that you'll be able to access at the end that has all of these listed for you. Okay, provide time estimates for the readings and the activities. To me, it doesn't matter if your students are traditional undergrads or adult learners. If you can provide a time estimate on how long this reading is going to take, how long this assignment might be, that helps the students adjust their time management. If they say, you know, I've got 15 minutes before I have to go to soccer practice or pick up my kids, whatever, I can do this part of this unit right now and then get to the rest later. It's also a great idea because if you told the students, you know, you should be able to complete this assignment in 1 hour, and a student has already spent 2.5 hours, yeah, they're taking too much time and they need to dial it back or get more help, etc. Number 5, include the time zone in your deadlines. For instance, we're in Mountain Daylight Time right now. If we have students who've gone remote and they're in Kentucky, or they've gone to Washington to visit their grandma for the weekend, whatever, included in time zone, usually for the server of where your institution is located, then that makes it clear for everybody. Number 6, point to the technical how-tos. Usually for the first assignment or first quiz, whatever, I like to include a list of the help links to the Canvas management system, instructor guide. And one of the reasons why I do this is an instructor a few years ago didn't know why students were not coming to his virtual office hours. And through feedback, he learned, well, we don't know how. And so then he started including the technical how-tos. And now the reason they may not come is because they're lazy. But anyway, you get the idea. Number 7, set up a discussion forum for logistical questions. This is a time saver for you and for your students. If all your students start asking the same logistical question about an assignment, then you can direct your students to say, oh, I know the answer to that. It's on page 606. Or you can give participation points to the students for helping to answer each other's questions. Of course, you want to jump in sometimes if they've given false information or they didn't quite understand it correctly. But that's a good way to keep your inbox from being full of emails. Number 8, spare the details in the syllabus. I like to keep a syllabus as long and as short as possible. For teaching online, you do need a lot of information in there about how to connect and so on and so forth. But you notice in the images here, I have a list of the different types of assignments and activities in the course, and it's just a paragraph or two. And then in the course, I can have an about section with details for each of those different kinds of activities. And notice this one, this critical essay is something with several deadlines during the semester. If I have just a one about page under course resources module, then students don't have to go searching, was that in week 2 or week 3? They can go right to the about section. Okay, quickly, any questions off the bat? My students don't use a discussion forum. Yeah, discussions, I mean, you can choose to use other items, Padlet, or you can do a group text, lots of different ways. Okay, we're going to move on to little tips for teaching. Number 9, add your portrait to the LMS account. My director happens to be in this session today, and she let me use a lot of screenshots from her courses. And you notice that she has an announcement and comments to a student on the gradebook and in the discussion forum. So if you have your portrait loaded in the LMS, then it helps the students all the more identify you as a person and not just this faceless void. So number 10, open module 0 before the start date. At our university, I like to design courses so that the syllabus and Canvas information, understanding Canvas, participation guidelines, netiquette, all of that information is in module 0 or week 0, week 1, whatever you want to call it, so that students can get started on that information before the course actually begins. I also open the course resources area so that they can get accustomed to things before they have assignments due. It's also a nice way to add things such as a syllabus quiz to get them practicing things before they have items that might be for points. also introducing themselves to each other gets them accustomed to using the discussion forum or whatever other kind of tools you might want to use. Quick question here. Do you pull in information from outside or create personalized information for your institution? We have a mixture of both in our Module 0. Most of it is just our own, but like the Understanding Canvas part, we mostly just point to the links in the Canvas student guide. They have pretty good videos and tutorials. So. Okay, number 12, contact students who haven't logged in by day 2 or 3. A lot of our online courses, at least for the undergrads, are only 8 weeks long. And so if a student has waited until, day 4 or so before logging in, they've missed out on quite a bit. So depending on the length of your course, it's a good idea to try to contact those students early on. Depending on your LMS, it may tell you when students have logged in. Canvas does that, and there's also a tool to message students who, and for instance, haven't submitted yet. Well, if it's that syllabus quiz that was in the Module 0, and you gave a deadline of the first Tuesday of week 1, then you can say, hey, I haven't seen your syllabus quiz. Are you still in the course, etc. Number 13, create announcements instead of or in addition to emails. The reason we suggest this is partly due to the Title IV compliance in online courses. If you're not familiar with that, if your institution receives federal financial aid or federal dollars, then Title IV is a requirement for there to be instructor interaction with the students that needs to be regular and substantive. And what that means is you, the instructor, are initiating the contact with the students. So it's not just grading items, it's emailing or announcements and so on and so forth. So if you only send emails and you had a Title IV audit, or maybe you have an accreditation team coming and they want to make sure that you were interacting with your students. If you only sent email, that's difficult to track down. And your students could say, I didn't receive that email. Whereas if it's in an announcement, you can go right to the course announcement area and say it was right here. Now in Canvas, when you create an announcement, it automatically sends an email to the student's email account that is registered in the system. So I'm sure that other LMSs do the same thing. Number 14, in communication, refer to the actual days of the week. I have this one in here because it has bit me in the past when I said this afternoon or tomorrow, evening, whatever, and students didn't see the announcement until a day or two later. And they're saying, well, aren't we having that virtual office hours tonight? No, that was yesterday. So now I'll just say this evening, Tuesday, or whatever, to make it clear which day I'm talking about. Number 15, make yourself available for synchronous interaction. Now this can vary. Maybe you want to have virtual office hours on a schedule each week. I think that's a good practice, no matter whether you're teaching online or remote, to have at least something that students know I can depend on going to that and getting my questions answered. In our research with the students and preparing for that Improving Your Blended Teaching course, so many of the students said they appreciated the opportunity to go synchronous with their instructor. So whether you're using Zoom, Google Meet, BlueJeans, etc., it's a great way to stay connected to your students. Whether you do that at the same time every week, maybe if you'd gone remote and you wanted to say, we're going to do this at the same time that class would have met, you want to make sure that it's going to be able to meet all the needs of the students, or you can make arrangements for the students who aren't able to to join in. For instance, when we had students who had to go home after COVID in spring, they would say, well, now that I'm home, I'm having to have a job to help keep up with the family, and so I can't meet at that time. So maybe have a couple of different times for your virtual office hours. Another aspect is to just be able to jump onto a virtual conferencing system at the drop of a hat or when students ask, simply to show that you're interested in them succeeding in the course. And if that means, oh, let's jump on for 15 minutes here, I think that's going to go a long way toward giving students the confidence that they need to continue. I see a few comments in the chat. Module 0 helps to get the late enrollers or strugglers. Yes. Google Calendar allows you to set up office hours so students can get personalized help. You might check with your LMS. Canvas also allows you to set up appointment setters so that your students can say, I would like to meet with you at such and so date and time, and it's right there connected to your course. That's a really nice tool. Calendly, I haven't used that one, but I like the name of it. Okay. Number 16, give students a deadline for starting a test. Again, I give this recommendation because it bit me in the rear end. One of our professors here was actually conducting research one semester on, it had something to do with students and their testing and so on and so forth. And she wanted to make sure that they could finish their tests in time. I don't remember exactly the details. What happened was she had given students a time deadline, say 90 minutes. Well, students didn't start the test until, half an hour before it's due. And then they were wondering, why did the LMS crash, submit it for them, and they weren't able to finish all of their exam. So if you tell them this is a 90-minute exam, you need to start by such and so time in order to submit it by the deadline. And really, you probably want to start sooner than that in case you have any technical glitches. So that gives your students no out, I should say, for saying, I didn't know that this was going to submit. Number 17, consider using video or audio to give feedback. A huge thing for students is to receive timely feedback, and that doesn't matter if they are face-to-face or online or remote. They need that feedback in a timely manner so they can incorporate it and improve and be motivated to improve for their continuing coursework. So depending on your LMS, it might have video and audio tools. Canvas does, right in the gradebook area, or I should say SpeedGrader. Google Docs will also allow you to use tools for voice typing. There's probably several others out there, but you can do the voice to text and then copy and paste it directly into your gradebook. Saves you a lot of time. And in some cases, you may not be a very fast typist, or you may not be very comfortable with your punctuation and grammar. And so using the speech to text might help you with that. Okay, number 18, let students know how you will use their feedback. We like to use a weekly reflection in our online courses so that students can say, these were my aha moments for the week. This is where I struggled. This is something I want the instructor to know. And it's important, A, to read that feedback, but then also it gives you an opportunity to do course design adjustments on the fly or to note them for the next time you teach. And there's several different ways that you could say, I'm going to use this feedback. Maybe you're going to research something. The course questions and suggestions discussion forum that I mentioned earlier, I do have suggestions in there in case students want to say, I think you really should consider doing this. And that way it's another opportunity for them to give you that kind of feedback. Something that you might use in the reflections is noticing aggregate information from your students. If a lot of students were struggling with a reading, or a lot of students did poorly on a test or something, you can say, okay, I'm taking this feedback into consideration. It's not necessarily feedback that students have given you directly, but you can use their assignment scores, their what they've done to help you see, I really need to tweak those instructions, or so on and so forth. And then other times you may receive feedback from students and you don't want to make the changes in this course. You can just say, I'll take that into consideration for next time. I don't know about you, but many times when I've taught online, you get that one student, one or two students who they're just grumpy the entire course and they bark a lot, and you feel bad. You don't want to, you know, it hurts your feelings, and you kind of you want to react and say, oh, well, I need to change that. But really, if it's only one student out of 22, maybe you don't need to change that. But if you start seeing it consistently every time you teach, with a few students saying that, maybe tweak the next time you teach. One other instance I had for doing that was, I can't remember now what it was, but I like things in a linear way, and I felt like I was providing all of the structure that students needed. And then I had someone say, well, how come you haven't just listed it this way? And I'm like, well, because I wouldn't use it that way, but obviously that student would have. And so I went ahead and incorporated it for the next time that I taught, and I had it both ways, which obviously is helping your learners who have different means of the way that they grasp information. Okay, number 19, ask students to check for missing grades. You can do this anytime during the course, but if you do it like right before midterms and then right before finals especially, then it gives your students the opportunity to go in and say, wait a minute, I thought I turned that in. And if they see a 0 there, well, I didn't receive it. So, oh, I guess I did have a glitch when I turned that in, and then I forgot to tell you, and I forgot to call the help desk, and whatever. And then you can use your judgment to show grace or not. But at least if you've given them the opportunity to check their grades, and then some learning management systems have a functionality in the gradebook to treat ungraded items as 0. So after a deadline of saying you need to check your grades by the such and so date, and anything that's empty by such and so date is going to get a 0, and that will affect your bottom line score. They don't have an excuse to say what happened after you've actually submitted the grades. Lastly, consider incentives for completing the course evaluation. Research has actually shown that when the instructor really invites the students to complete the course eval, the students go, oh, this professor really does take that to heart. And providing some kind of incentive, in this case, this professor said he would provide 5 bonus points if the response rate reached 85% or more. Now, maybe you're not going to reach that, but at least if it gets a few more students to complete the course evaluation, because we all know that the ones who complete it tend to be grumpy or super satisfied. And it's the ones in between that you'd really want to try to get their input as well. So consider using the incentives. I moved very quickly through all of that. But now let's hear from you folks. First, do we have any questions? Let me check the chat. Okay, I don't see any more questions right now, but let me invite you, if you want to unmute yourself and show your face and ask a question, or we can all go to the Google Doc that I've created, and I have those items listed. And if you want to add some yourself, go ahead and start doing that. Diane says, I was encouraged that I am already doing many of those ideas. Yes, so for me, a lot of times going to a conference is just confirming that, yes, I'm doing it right. I'm doing it well. And obviously there's tons more that I could have included in this, and a lot of ideas that Quality Matters standards provide, but these were the quick ones that I thought, these are really good ones that have proved beneficial in my tenure here. Use videos to explain large assignments. Let the students hear your expectations. That's a good one. Using video as announcements. Thank you, Rebecca. Would anybody else like to speak up and share an idea?
I like
Vicki,
to use
go ahead.
flipgrid.com and have students make 90-second selfie videos to introduce themselves to the online class. And I encourage them that they can include their kids and their pets as well.
What was that website?
Flipgrid.com.
Oh, okay, Flipgrid. Yes, yes. Anytime you want to show a doggy or a kitty, I'm going to be interested. And in fact, during COVID last spring, the remote time, I remember one of my TAs coming into the office, and she was, or not to the office, but she told me, I was just thrilled in our Zoom, our Google Meet today, the professor had a new puppy, and we all just went, oh, and I'm like, okay, that's great. The instructor humanized the class a little bit and got the students interested, and then went on to the lecture.
I got a quick suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
I use a technique called digital canaries, which hails back to the notion of the canary in the coal mine. Seems like every course there's 5, 6, 7 students that are really struggling at the very beginning of the course, and the sooner I find them, the like you mentioned earlier, better. So I have 3 or 4 hidden tasks designed to determine if these online students are somehow falling behind. Maybe they're struggling with navigation. Some of them are skimmers, or they're going to the wrong part of the dashboard. They click on the wrong things and they just get lost. They never go to the modules, or they're lost in general.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, I set these canaries out. Now, if a student misses one, I take notice. And if a student misses 2 of these embedded tasks, these little special things that I put in the beginning of the course, then I'm poised, ready to call them. Then if they miss 3, I actually do a physical phone call and talk to them personally to find out why they're lost, because it's so much better than 3-4 weeks later, they're angry, they're lost, they're confused, they're giving up all hope,
Mm-hmm.
So the digital canary approach is very effective. It has eliminated almost all stragglers in the
Wow.
course because I catch them at the beginning. And people always ask me, what's a digital canary like? It might be somewhere in the module, I put a little thing, a little entry in there that simply says, fill in your name here, and that's all it requires. Or do this little activity. It's maybe a get acquainted activity. And I'm tracking them. And whoever doesn't, whenever the canary dies, I call them.
I love that. That reminds me of when I was in high school government class and I used to write in the middle of my paper, Mr. Barstad, if you're really reading this, I'll buy you a Coke. And I never had to buy him a Coke. So.
I have a really, I mean, this is not a glamorous technique, but it has really worked for me for the last year. And that's just building in a flexible late policy. So I just say now, you have 24-hour grace period on anything. And when students write and they're in a panic, it's like, see the 24-hour grace period, it's great. And they can do 3 days even after the grace period with small penalties, but boy, has that saved me so much of the kind of fighting or arguing, or, just, it takes all if they're feeling crabby, it takes that wind out of their sails. And I even will now, the day an assignment is due, right after, I will go in and I'll put zeros in for anyone who missed anything the very next morning. And I'll put a little note that says, I hope you'll be late. I hope you'll turn this in late. And that little zero gets their attention right away. But then it pushes them straight to that late policy where they go, oh, I could hand this in by tonight and still not lose any points. So I hope you'll be late, and that to me has kept a lot of students on track, especially ones who just overlooked it.
I like that. I like that a lot. Diane says, my husband gives a pass for late assignments they can use at any time. So is that only a one-time thing, Rebecca?
I let them do it on everything because except for discussion boards, because those do need to be timely. But that 4-day range with one of those days being without a penalty at all, that just really keeps a student who's having a hard time on track. And because, it gets really hard to say, well, for you could be late because you had a medical issue, but for you, the fact that your child's having a medical issue, but you moved, but you had a work problem, but you have no internet, it gets really hard with all of that. So it's just like, use it for whatever within 4 days. And after 4 days, I'm a real stickler, but how quickly am I going to grade it anyhow? As long as they don't get off track.
That's true.
I actually did away with my late penalties completely for my grad classes. They're only 7 weeks long. So when a student's late, I just figure that between balancing work, life, family, and this little pandemic thing we're going through, that they have plenty to stress about. They don't need to stress about having it done within the next 24 to 48 hours or I'm going to dock their grade. I usually talk to them. They might say, oh, Dr. Morrison, my kid was sick and I would not let daddy hold him so that I could get my work done. And I'll say, all right, that's fine. Just, let me know when you turn it in because it won't pop up on Canvas so that I know to grade it. And they do. And the feedback that I've gotten from these classes is thank you for being a human being and understanding that this stuff is going on, because apparently nobody else in my department is human.
Oh, right. Chris writes, Tacey was writing, our advisory committee members that are comprised of local employers have begged us to hold students to workplace readiness skills, such as turning things in on time. That's That's a key skill, isn't it? And then Chris, do I have any tips for engaging students who do not want to be engaged? They do well on assignments and assessments, but don't like the active learning activities. That's a good question. What do you all think? Students who don't want to be engaged. I know in one of our interviews with a student, this was related to the discussion forum. He said, I don't really want to respond in the discussion forum because I don't think they're actually going to read it. I know the professor requires us to write something and then we're supposed to respond to 2 people and so on and so forth. He's like, it's just totally artificial. So why should I respond there? And actually that was a fairly big aha for us. One of our ahas regarding discussions, and we've also been doing some scholarly work in that area. So Len says, I apply fun theory here, works better than anything. Len, would you explain that? If you have a microphone. Len's going to attach a 2-page position paper. Okay. I know I'm probably skipping some of these. I'm not intending to skip. Offer multiple modes of response, verbal, text, images, etc. Yes, I know one instructor who has offered that kind of choice on their assignments, and students don't really always take advantage of the different options they can do, but they have indicated that they appreciated that they had a choice on how they could respond to an assignment. Actually, one of our instructors here during last spring offered students to read several different texts and then respond in the discussion based on whatever text they had read. And so that way there's a lot more variety in the discussion forum rather than everybody responding to the exact same thing. Leslie asked, do students know what engagement looks like? Perhaps defining that with your class could help struggling students understand the expectations. I think you're onto something there. So many times, you know, we all know that the wallflowers in the class, in the physical classroom, don't really tend to open their mouths, but they are deep thinkers. And so maybe helping them to understand what it is that you want them to contribute or how to contribute would help them. Sometimes I also say, you know what, your perspective may be helpful to somebody else. You may know a lot about this already, but maybe your person next to you or the person, you know, next to you in the roster doesn't know as much as you do. And so by sharing your perspectives, you are helping that student along. Vicki, sometimes you can brainstorm with students to reframe specific assignments. It's a good idea. Let the students say, this is how I would have done this assignment if we were redoing this course. Chris, so many of the things we do based on research, students do not like nor seem to benefit. I think you're right there. And certainly students have changed a lot just in the past 15 years that I've been in higher ed. So I have a colleague out at Twin Falls, Southern College of Idaho, who lets her students establish the course design at the very beginning, and they determine what they're going to have to do in order to earn an A, earn a B, earn a C, and so on and so forth. And they set their own parameters as a class at the very beginning, and then the chips fall where they may. Wendy, if they can come up with an idea that meets the outcome or objective, as long as I can use that idea and still evaluate it, I say yes. That's very important to make sure the students are actually doing something that you can measure for the objectives. Casey, many of my classes have benefited from a class Facebook group. The change in environment helps students to loosen up and riff on the course material in interesting ways. I would say yes, that's an outstanding way to get your students to be more together. You can also see when they actually viewed something. I have a Facebook group of young adults from my church, and it is very active in there, far more than it would be otherwise with texting or so on and so forth, because they can share, you know, the images and everything right in real time. It's really nice. Vicki asked, how do you assess participation in an online class? Any ideas that people would like to share for that? Chris says some of the students say that they come to learn and not play games. Yeah. Karen, some students, especially with disabilities, may not want or be able to participate fully. If they meet the objectives, then it shouldn't be required to engage in some activities. That's an interesting perspective, yes. I think I would probably strive to offer them something if they want to engage somehow with the material in a different way. Or off the top of my head, I'm wondering maybe you could ask students to volunteer to interact with the student with disability in a way that helps to accomplish all those objectives. Leslie's asking, why would we assess participation? Aren't we supposed to assess the learning? For teaching online, I think participation is part of making sure students are motivated. And if they know that you value participation, then they understand better, oh, I can't just dial it in and I can't just do all the assignments really late here and just zoom it in. I'm actually an active member of the class. Rebecca is Googling fun theory and seeing some fun results. Okay. Len is offering his email address, len.scrogan@ucdenver.edu, for that short position paper on how to radically humanize your online course. There was also a session here yesterday in this conference on humanizing the course, so you might be able to check the recordings for that. Bethany says that she uses reading guides to assess student participation in the weekly reading and lectures. She grades it as complete or incomplete. Giving students credit for engaging synchronously. Yes, I like to give students points for everything. If I have them do a syllabus quiz, I want to give them points. The introduction posts, give them points. If they've made an effort to do something, points are free. I mean, why not make your course worth 1,000 points and just, you know, give them something to show that you appreciate them participating. Okay, we have just about 4 minutes left. I'm wondering if there are any other questions or ideas that you'd like to throw out there. We have quite a few ideas in the Google Doc. You can feel free to make a copy of the Google Doc for yourself. You would go up to File and make a copy and save it to your own Google Drive, and then feel free to share that with your faculty or your peers. Okay, I don't want to cut us off too soon, but if there aren't any other questions or ideas to share. Thank you. All right.